because we are in our room, so we think we are a blind spot.
Oh no.
So
I've been to your room a number of times.
Yeah. So would you explain the blind spot that we find it?
Pardon?
The blind spot.
Oh, blind spot.
Yeah.
Blind spot, one of the criteria in strategic planning is that your planning process must consider blind spots. And the most frequent way used by organizations, businesses in particular, in making sure that they have considered those blind spots is by doing scenario analysis. Okay? So you construct scenarios of how the future environment might look like. Okay, so I gave an example of scenario analysis that we did in our business school. So one scenario was commercialization of higher education. More private for-profit schools coming up, for instance. Another scenario dealt with open networking, like and MIT is at the forefront of this, making everything available through the internet for free. Okay, so that's a source of competition too. Okay. And then another scenario, and then there was another scenario that dealt with universities are going to be more viewed as they should be serving local communities. Okay? Noble objective. But if your strategy as an organization, as a school is to internationalize, to globalize, then each one of those scenarios will have a different impact on your school, on your organization. So there is a technique called, what I presented yesterday, it's called the wind tunnel. Okay. So you subject all of your strategies into this wind tunnel of the different scenarios and see what kind of modifications do you need to do to your strategy, what kind of amendments do you need to have in order for that strategy to be stronger, okay, so that they can survive those different scenarios. So that is a way by which you could respond to blind spots. Okay. Any other questions? Hey, you're all wanting to go home. So those expectations, free work for December, is that doable? Yes? Yes, right? Yes. Okay. Well, if you all graduate in June, yes, we will have a celebration. Okay? I can't tell you what kind of celebration it is yet. We will have a celebration. For those who will be with us. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
Anyhow, based on your experience, what is, on top of lacking support from senior leaders and so on, what is in terms of the team, the characteristics of the team that really bring success to this process? The combinations of those who have to be together to make it happen. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The more cross-functional the team is, the better, because it cannot be a team of all academics, or it cannot be a team of all finance people. So the most cross-functional the team is, the better, because you're going to take a look at the entire organization itself. But it's not really the characteristic of the team, but really what matters is what kind of behaviors does the team exhibit. So if you go to the operating principles that we had at the beginning of the workshop, remember the group operating principles. Those operating principles are norms that my Baldrige examiner teams have developed over the years. So over the years, before we begin our assessment, we always start by describing what are the behaviors that we need to have as a team in order for us to succeed. So over the years, I just jotted them down and come up with a list of the 7 operating principles, okay, for teams. And of course, those principles are all subset of the big principle, which is no one is smarter than all of us. Okay, no one is smarter than all of us. Okay, and so the other part of that is that everyone is responsible for each other's success. So you have this spirit of mutual accountability within your team. And that spirit of mutual accountability means that you realize that we're all human beings. No one is perfect. Okay? I have imperfections. You have imperfections. There are things that I'm so good at that you're not good at. There are things that you're good at that I'm not good at. Okay? And so you make allowances for each other, and then it's an issue of the kind of mindset that you have when you get into the team. That your common objective is to succeed. And then your objective is actually to help your teammates succeed. Okay? And so their objectives as well is to make it succeed. Okay, so those are the important characteristics of a team that I'd like to share with you. So, and they're documented as the group operating principles. Any other questions? Oh, by the way, that's not me. So. I have a lot of hair. I don't. Okay, so yes. Parking lot is just a term, or what we say. It's an idiomatic expression in the United States to say that. Oh, I have some questions. Okay. Oh, you take it to the parking lot. Okay. Parking lot is where you converse with your other people. You know, you say where you park your car. So your parking lot, that's where a lot of conversations take place. Okay? So that's what it means. So when the usual usage of the term is, well, we got questions in a training like this. Okay, so the question will take a long time to answer, so we'll say, take it to the parking lot. The parking lot is usually at the end of the day or at the end of the training. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Can you say something with the people in the metro that come into this room? What will be their future to enroll in this program?
Oh, the future lies in their hands. Okay, let me. This is the plan. Thank you. Have a safe class. Okay. There are 7 participating universities in this go-around in the fast track, so what I would suggest is that maybe increase that size to 10, okay? Increase the size to 10, so in December we take 3 new universities into the fast track, okay? Depending on who was able to keep up with all the work that we did, okay? And so that means that those 3 new universities will have to do OP 1, 2, and 3, you know, and then be ready for. Okay, goodbye. Okay. Have a safe trip back home. And then we'll begin a second cohort in June of next year. So conceivably they will be part of the second cohort along with the other universities identified in the initial pilots that were not part of this training.
And then allow 3 of them to create this group?
Yeah.
The second cohort.
Well, it's either
If
in
they
the
want to.
Yeah, or they can choose to be in the second cohort if, well, if they're able to catch up, because they receive the same kind of input, okay, that this room received. So it's a question of whether they were able to catch up with all the worksheets and so on, and be able to prepare the pre-work for December. That will be the grading criterion, because you need to have the same kind of preparation in December. So we will have 10 in December, then a cohort of another 10 starting June of next year, then a cohort of another 10 in the year 2014, so that will make up the 30, the total of 30 universities.
Then for our observers, my dear observers, we can talk behind the scenes after this.
Yeah. In terms of my planned involvement is that I will be delivering the first two cohorts, like instructing the first two cohorts. But the third cohort, then that will be taught by a local consultant, local trainer by that time. And I'll spend more time by the third cohort in developing the operating manual, okay, on how then do you deploy this to all universities in the country. So that's the long-term plan. Or at least that's my strategic objective. That's the strategic objective that has been assigned to me. Any other questions?
I do have one question.
Yes.
As you have mentioned that University of Arkansas is the only university in the U.S. that applies for the Malcolm College Award.
Not the only one who applied, but the only one that got it.
The College Award.
Yeah.
Sorry. Almost got it right. Yeah. So in terms of Thailand, we also have a number of universities of varying missions and of varying sizes. So what do you see in terms of bringing the whole process to and trying to come up with what kind of goodness or what kind of impediments that you think the process will bring, or something that we have to look forward into the future so that we can prepare ahead of time?
There have been a number of universities in the U.S. that have adopted the Baldrige framework. Some have chosen to apply for the award. Some have chosen not to apply for the award. Some have chosen to participate only in the state quality award levels. Okay. So, but when I take a look at the common characteristic of all of those universities, they tend to be smaller. Okay. So size is important, because if you apply as a big university, then you have a question of deployment. Okay. But if you're in a big university, then what I would propose that you do is consider applying as a faculty within the big university. Unless if you're a small university, you're more manageable, so you can actually do it at the... that's a common characteristic of ISO. Because the other higher education institutions that have received the Baldrige, there was a business school in the university that have received the Baldrige, and then there are a couple of 2-year associate colleges who have received the Baldrige, but they are generally a school of about 5,000 students or less. So size becomes an impediment. So a university like Mahidol, for instance, okay, how large is Mahidol, the entire university? Like you include your university college, you include your...
It's large, it's more than 10,000 because we have 3 hospitals,
Yeah.
university hospitals.
Mm-hmm. So you may have to do it faculty by faculty. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, none? Then I'll have one more slide. Who is this guy? It's obviously a runner, right? His name is Sir, he was not Sir yet at this time, Sir Roger Bannister. He was a medical student in the UK, and he's a runner. Okay, he wants to run, and he set it as a profession, as a personal goal, to run the mile below 4 minutes. Because at that time, no person has ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. The story is that, okay, well, if you run the mile in less than 4 minutes, you will die before you get to the finish line. You know, all sorts of reasons why you cannot run the mile in 4 minutes. Okay? And he's a medical student. Okay, so of course he's like, he can run the mile in less than 4 minutes. So he trained, until one day he was able to run the mile in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. Okay? Under conditions that were less than ideal. The weather was bad, it was very windy. Well, very windy, and then the track where he ran, okay, the track was not exactly perfect. Now, who told me this story? I used to run when I was in high school, when I was in college. I was a fast runner at that time. Now I can't run. You guys, signs of progress here. So it was our coach who actually told me the story. So the moral of it, so now the thing is, after he ran after he ran it, 30 other runners broke the barrier within a year. It only took one person to prove that you can do it, okay? And then once the mental barrier has been broken, 30 other runners who beat the barrier, okay? Now, the interesting part of this is that, a month after he beat the 4-minute mile barrier, there was this Australian, his name is John Landy, who actually broke the 4-minute mile barrier 3 minutes 58 seconds. Okay, faster than him. Okay, so guess what happened next? The Battle of the Champions, right? Okay, the British Empire Games were going to be held that year. Fortunately, around August of that year, I think, because this happened in May. So August of that year, British Empire Games, at that time it was still called British Empire Games, now it's Commonwealth Games. British Empire Games were going to be held in Vancouver. Okay? So John Landy and Roger Bannister are going to run the mile. That is called the Mile of the Century. Okay? That game was called the Mile of the Century. So the gun was fired. Okay. He started running. Okay. John Landy was leading throughout the race. Okay. And Bannister was just at the back, just slowly inching, until the final lap of the race. You know what John Landy did? He looked to his right. And when he looked to his right, Bannister just went past it. You can actually see this in YouTube, by the way. Oops. That's one. See? Oh, he looked to his left. I'm sorry. He looked to his left. So, he looked to his left, and Bannister just passed him. And in the end, he won the mile. Okay? And he even beat his original record. So the moral of the story is, once you set your goal, just keep on pursuing it. Never mind what the others are doing. Okay? You see, the problem is, and this is what happens when the reason why we benchmark is so that we will set goals for ourselves. And it is not only benchmarking is not about, you're always trying to beat your competition. Okay? No, the reason why you benchmark is that so that you can set a stretch goal for your organization And that is the goal that you beat, okay? Never mind what the rest of the world is doing. Their situation is different from yours, okay? So your goal is the most important goal that you are the most important institution. You should be your most important institution to take care of. And so that's the moral of the story. Now, John Landy was then interviewed many years later, okay, and was looking at his life, how it has been, and he said that was the most significant mistake that he made in his life. That he looked back. He was wondering where Bannister was. He forgot what his goal is. His goal is just to beat his original record, and he's wondering, so that's what happened. The rest is history. So, do you think that TQA is a unsurmountable climb, you know, like it's climbing Mount Everest? But people have climbed to Mount Everest, okay? Even handicapped people have climbed Mount Everest. So if others are able to do it, should be able to do it too. And so good luck in all of your ventures, and hopefully those of you at the back, those institutions, universities who are in the other room, that at least 3 of you would say, I'll take the challenge, I'll join you in December. Okay, I'll join you in December, and so I hope to see you again in 6 months. Okay, with all the promises that you made, okay? With all the commitments that you made. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I pray?